What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down some things you need to know if you play the wide receiver position. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Hope it could teach you a few new things. But also, fellas, if you're a wide receiver and you guys want to improve your press releases, check out that very first link in the description below for a 50-minute long video on 20 different wide receiver press releases, when to use each press release versus different coverage looks, and then drills with sets and reps all mapped out for you on how to improve those press releases. So check out that very first link in the description below if you guys are interested in our 50-minute long press release video. Let's get started with this. So now, first things first here, what I want to talk about, this route from Judy. He's running this deep out route. And I want to talk to you about running routes off of steps. So let's play this clip here from Judy. Anybody that has any experience with wide receiver knows how hard this is. Being able to cut in stride, speed cut this thing out, not lose any speed, not raise up your pad level, and be able to just put the brakes on right now on a dime. Now, how he's able to do this in this specific scenario when it is zone coverage is that he is running his routes off of steps. So, and this is probably not something that he's thinking about in the actual game scenario. This is something that he's repped out over and over and over again. But if you're a wide receiver, it's the offseason. Whenever you're running routes and you're not working a press release situation, you're not working, a live situation versus a guy in front of you where it's one-on-ones or whatever it might be, and you're running routes just versus air, everything should be off of steps. So what do I mean by steps? So he's breaking on this route off of his fourth inside step. So his inside foot would be his right foot. So his fourth right foot. The left foot would be the outside foot. So it's counted steps. He comes off the ball. That would be his first inside step. Now he takes another one. That's the second. Then he comes up here. That's the third. And then he is breaking off of the fourth on this deep speed out. That's probably like a 12 to 15 yard out, I would say. Now, most of the time, high school offenses, youth offenses, you're not running this deep out and trying to hit it off the speed cut. You're probably running this thing at 10 yards. They're probably going to tell you, hey, you're going to run a 10-yard speed out. Now, the reason why I bring this up is so many wide receivers, when they hear that phrase, oh, hey, you're going to go run a 10-yard out, when they get to about 8 yards, 7 yards, they start to slow themselves down because they're thinking about 10 yards. They're looking at 10 yards. They start to chop their feet. They start to raise their pad level. All their weight goes back. We cannot have that, fellas, because as we know, that does not sell vertical. My number one goal whenever I'm running routes, especially a deep route like so, is I have to make this DB, I have to make a safety, whoever I'm running at, think that I am going deep. And how I make a DB think that I am running deep is by running in full stride, keeping a good pad level with a slight lean forward, running hard. All of those things cannot be accomplished if I'm looking down and I'm worried about a yardage marker. This is why I can't stand it when wide receiver coaches will set up a million different cones for guys and they have them just zigzag around, but there's no purpose in them actually keeping a stride. They're just taking choppy steps throughout the route. And that does not translate to the top of the break where you could just put the brakes on a dime like this. Now, again, this is much easier said than done. Judy being able to do this and cut this far downfield shows how strong his legs are, how he has great ankle stability, how he has great knee stability, his ligaments are strong in his legs, and he's got the correct form. All of those things tie into this physically, but you have to make sure, fellas, that we practice running routes off of steps, not just setting up a cone 20 yards away and then breaking down. I know most of you, and I'll tell you this right now, I know we struggle with it as well. In California, it's not like Florida where you have a bunch of different parks that all have, lined 100-yard turf fields. So a lot of times we're working out at soccer fields, working out at parks where there's no lines. So everything should be off of steps. I'm not going to have you run a route and set up a cone and let you just run up and slow down and then break at the cone. Now, is this something you should do in every situation? I don't think so. Because normally what I've been taught, what I was taught when I played, what I teach my players is that when it's zone coverage or off man, your routes should be ran off of steps because it's so timing based. It's off coverage. The quarterback needs to be on time. He needs to get you the ball early. But if it were to be press coverage, that's when it's a landmark situation. So if I was working like a press coverage drill with one of my wide receivers and I had a DB lined up in front of him, I would probably set up a cone as a landmark for us to break. But again, you don't want to chop your stride. You don't want to be thinking about the cone, and you have to do the pre-work that leads into that. So running routes off of steps not only helps that specific scenario, but it helps you when you have a landmark situation where you just need to, okay, I got to go get to 10 yards. I need to be able to cut on a dime, maintain my stride. I've done that before, so it should be second nature and it should feel natural. So fellas, I wanted to make sure that you knew that, you heard that from somewhere, because running routes off of steps is what you will have to do at the next level. I think that's a huge adjustment that a lot of high school wide receivers don't talk a lot about when they get to that collegiate level, is that their routes are all off of steps. You got routes off the third inside, fourth outside, fifth outside. And everybody's like, well, man, what do I do? And the reason why we count inside or outside steps is just because it's easier. If you try to count every individual step, you're thinking too much. Okay, so next thing I want to make sure that I discuss here with the wide receivers is that when you have a reduced split and you have outside leverage off coverage, you probably, when you're running an outside breaking route, need to get comfortable attacking a specific shoulder of the DB. So what do I mean by that? So let's watch Amari Cooper run this route. He's running a 10-yard out route. So when a DB is lined up outside leverage, what is a DB trying to protect? He's trying to protect the outside. He's trying to prevent the exact route that we have to run here. A 10-yard out, a 12-yard corner, a comeback, maybe even a fade. He's trying to funnel everything to the inside, mainly because he's got help to the inside. And number two, he saw the wide receiver reduce his split. That means that he lines up closer to the offensive line. So chances are he does that to either run a drag, which will be right into the help that this guy has, or to use the space he created to the sideline to run an outside breaking route. So smart DBs are going to line up an outside leverage. But when I have to run the outside breaking route, when I have to run a route to the leverage of the DB. So that means an outside breaking route when the DB is lined up outside leverage. And that also means an inside breaking route when the DB is lined up inside leverage. You have to get comfortable attacking his shoulder and hip. I call it splitting the DB in half. So when he comes off the ball, you see Amari Cooper, he's not trying to attack the blind spot. He's not trying to square up the DB and angle his leverage to the outside. He is focused on getting this DB to flip his hips so he has space to the sideline. That's the whole reason we cut our split down in the first place, was to use the space. So if you guys just go run to the outside and round it while this DB's outside leverage, he's going to force us all the way to the sideline. So we have to make sure that we get comfortable, like I said, splitting the DB in half. Let's go push and attack that inside shoulder so we can get his hips to flip. And it's the same thing that we just talked about in that last example with Judy. He's got a good pad level. He's running in full stride. He's running in full speed because that is what's going to get this guy to commit to the fade, just like why it was important that we run routes off of steps. It's easier. When you're counting your steps, you're not worried about chopping your feet. You're not worried about a cone. You're not worried about depth and starting to slow down. So Cooper is able to do that and is able to put the brakes on and get out on this out route. Let's count his steps here too, just for the sake of doing it because we were talking about it. So he comes off the ball. That's his first inside. That's his second inside. And then he is going to make this break off of his fourth inside. That is his third inside step right there. Fourth inside breaks it off. Same exact route we just saw from Judy. Same exact stride, same exact speed, same exact pad level. So again, fellas, that's like the name of the wide receiver position. You have to know conceptually what we're trying to do. We're running routes off of that fourth inside. We have to make sure that we self-fade, number one. Number two, we have to make sure that I have the right mechanics, I have the right strength, I have the right ankle stability, knee stability. That's all the drill work that we do and the strength work that we should do. And then last but not least, I have to know how to attack a specific coverage. I have to know the reason why I'm doing the things that I'm doing and how I can structure my route, because that is ultimately what gets us separation. If we can get separation and give my QB space, we are a very, very dangerous wide receiver. Let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. Great job by Cooper attacking that inside shoulder and hip, splitting that DB in half, as I like to say, and then winning on that out route. Okay, so next thing I want to make sure that I discuss here with you guys, and I feel every wide receiver needs to understand this, is how you guys can run a fade route versus zone coverage, press bail, off coverage, whatever you want to think of it, but mainly zone coverage. So let's play this full speed. This is a mistake. This is a bad example from this wide receiver, and then I'm going to show a good example here in a second. So he comes off the ball, he's facing this press bail look. He just runs to the outside. That is something that we can never do as a wide receiver. So when I'm a wide receiver, and I got zone coverage, we know there's probably two places that I need to attack on this DB. We want to treat it just like that outside leverage off man that we had. So remember that clip from Amari Cooper, where I'm going to rewind it just so I could show you guys for a sec. It's the same concept. If this is off man, but he's outside leverage, it's the same concept as zone outside leverage. He's trying to protect the outside. So if Amari Cooper had to run like a post route, what do you think he would do? He would probably angle his stem to the outside, get this guy to protect his leverage, then break to the post because now he's got a bigger window to the post. So same idea even when it's press bail and he's outside leverage. Even when it's zone, his eyes are in the backfield trying to read the number, not the backfield, but his eyes are inside trying to read the number two or read the quarterback. It's the same idea. If this receiver had to run a post, where do you think he would go? He would attack blind spot. He would try to get this DB to widen so he could slip underneath and run a post. Imagine if he had to run a 10-yard out route. What would he do? You would attack here and try to get to his inside shoulder and hip, force him to think fade, and then slip under, giving yourself space to run the out. So now if I got to run a fade, I want to try to make him think that I'm running a post because that's the only way that's going to get him to crash. I got to make sure that I attack his inside shoulder and his inside hip. So rather than just taking off and trying to beat him in a foot race to the blind spot where this DB is just going to squeeze you to the sideline, you would want to attack his front hip, make him uncomfortable, try to step on his toes, and give him a hard fake to the inside like you're running a post. Because that might get him to crash down, but that also gives me space to be able to slip behind and get over the top on this fade. But we cannot just try to run around, guys, fellas. Running around DBs has never worked, especially against disciplined DBs. Against a scrub DB, a youth DB who's never played before, a high school DB who's not experienced, yeah, that might work. But that's not what I'm trying to get you ready for. I'm trying to get you ready for a guy who knows what he is doing. So against zone or against press bail, we have to threaten to the inside if I'm trying to run a fade. I cannot just try to run around him. I cannot just take the inside release. In most cases, sometimes if he's really hard outside leverage, then yes, you could take the inside release. But most of the time, we need to attack his front hip and toes and threaten him to the inside. So now let's look at a good example of this. This is from Judy. Now, everybody, when I've posted this before and I've compared it to a similar example of a fade, and everybody said, oh, this is a different coverage. That's not the same look. It's the same exact thing, except he's not in press bail. He didn't show press and bail out of there. His coverage responsibilities are the exact same thing. He is not trying to do anything different than that last DB, except he's not trying to disguise press to throw off the quarterback and to throw off the receiver's timing. He's outside leverage. He turns in zone. His eyes are looking to read the number 2 or to read the quarterback. It's the same difference. So Judy, what he doesn't do is just take off and try to run around him and get to this like blind spot, if you will. Watch what he does. He closes the space here and gives a move inside to threaten on the post because that's the only way we're going to get this guy to drive, right? That's the only way that we were going to get him to crash down. Now, this might be a route out of the slot, right? This is like a slot fade, outside receivers running a slant underneath. Do you think it changes? Absolutely not. The way you would run this route versus this type of coverage does not change. If this DB were lined up inside leverage, it might change. You would attack him, give him a move, and then go to the outside. But because he's outside shade, and it's a slot fade, especially because that's probably a mandatory outside release route, you have to run it this way. So again, he closes the space, makes him uncomfortable. Head fake to the inside, attacking that inside shoulder and inside hip. Splitting that DB in half, if you will, so we could slip behind him and get to that restack position. That's textbook right there from Judy on how to run a fade versus that off coverage. Zone coverage, fellas, where they're off 7 yards, press bail zone coverage, or maybe that catch technique zone coverage where he's sitting at 5. I wouldn't even call it catch technique. That's not the right word for it. But any type of zone, fellas, it is the exact same concept, whether they're showing press bail or whether they're just straight up in off coverage. You have to understand how to run routes, and you got to know how to run that fade, because trust me, if you can get behind that zone coverage DB, you got a lot of space, and that is a big, big play that you can put on film. All right, fellas, really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. Always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys as usual. And again, fellas, if you guys would like 20 different press releases to learn with drills and when to use each press release, check out that very first link in the description below for our 50-minute long video. I'll see you guys next time.